Welcome to the first Business as Unusual webinar focused on the future of work. We again want to thank the many agency leaders across the country and a few around the world who've contributed their time, their ideas, and their insights to this series that is focused on our community and the changes we anticipate in the coming months and years. And we want to thank again our partners, Gensler, a leading global architectural and design firm, and We Are Rosie, a rapidly growing community-based supplier of diverse marketing talent. Both organizations have brought much thinking and ideas to the table, and we thank them for that. In fact, Tom Krismanek, principal at Gensler, is joining our panel of agency leaders today. Our August panel today includes some of the leading voices in our industry. Kim Getty, CEO of Deutsch LA, Laura Manis, CEO of Havas, New York, Aaron Walton, CEO and co-founder of Walton Isaacson, and Matt Walsh, CEO of Greenstone. So despite the hardships of our country, our communities, our teams, and our family has faced during the pandemic, we believe that the learnings and the experiences will reshape the agency world materially and positively, and how we view our space, how we maintain our culture and deliver business driving creative ideas, and how we recruit, inspire, and retain a world-class talent. Today, we'll focus on the changing role of the office in our agency community. So let's get right into the discussion. So as an opener, I'd like to invite each of our agency leaders to share thoughts on the following question. What has been the most important learning about your agency space as you've led your teams through the COVID pandemic? Aaron, do you want to kick us off?
Sure. Well, first of all, thank you for hosting and for putting this webinar together. I think it's obviously so timely, and I'm excited to be on this panel with these incredible leaders, and I'm going to be taking copious notes and learning from them as well. But here's what I will tell you. What I've learned is that our agency space means different things to different people. I mean, fundamentally, I think the common denominator for everyone that works for us is that we all want a safe work environment. But beyond that, the kind of agency space for me is like a headspace, right? It's a perception, it's a town square, it's a private place away from home. Sometimes it's a change of view. And it's as much psychological for me as it is physical. And it's as such, we really want to make sure that we're kind of caring about the needs of the people that work for us. We want to make sure that we're caring about the needs for their approach to the roles that they have. And we want to make sure that we're delivering what is kind of best for our clients. So what I've learned is that it's not about the four walls or the ceiling or the desks or the doors. It's really about making sure that we have a space, whether that's virtually or physically, where we can collaborate, where we can collide, and where we can kind of come together to develop really great and innovative work.
Thanks, Kim.
Well, I'll echo Aaron's thanks, and I'm excited to learn from everyone in this discussion. I think a part of what we can all do is sort of evolve collectively as an industry and support each other in defining new best practices and things together. I know we definitely don't have it all figured out at Deutsch LA. One of my big observations is that the focus of a lot of the conversation around space has been about collaboration and problem solving and the need for space to help us do that. And while I think that's true, I think as an industry, we've proven that we can be wildly productive remotely. And I actually think that what we might need most from our space is a lack of productivity. It's the opposite of that work. I think it's fair to say we're all trading a bit on the relationship equity that we had built for years and years and years to power us through this time of the pandemic and remote work. And it's incumbent upon all of us as leaders to just continue to invest into building that and really fostering those personal connections that drive trust and community. I think it's those personal connections that accomplish those things that we all value: inclusivity, risk-taking. Like, those are the things that we need. So, how can we keep doing that? I mean, and one example, when we were sort of celebrating and honoring the 1 year of working remotely, I think our first instinct is, hey, let's look at everything that we can do and what we accomplished as a company in the last year. There's a lot to be proud of. And then that felt like the exact wrong thing to do. And so what we did instead was build a presentation of everything that was accomplished outside of work over the last year. The babies that were born, the trips that were taken, the side hustles that were launched. And I think that that's so much of what our shared space gives us. And that's what we're missing. And that's what we need to work hard to continue to invest into and create.
Thanks for that. Laura?
Sure. Thank you. I'll just continue to build on that. I think certainly what Erin, opened with around creating kind of a psychological safe space. And I think, Kim, what you just shared about really looking outside of the building, and it's really, what it's become. And, for me, I think what I've learned the most throughout the pandemic is that fostering a creative community and scaling rituals really has little to do with the physical space, and it's less about the building. It has more to do with intentionally holding space for each other. And it's really become more of a verb of building each other up. And especially now with this 1 year milestone, I think it's been described as kind of hitting the pandemic wall. That's been a big learning, that there's a role, for the physical space. And I know we're going to unpack that and talk about that a bit more here today. But the notion of kind of holding space for each other and really the sense of togetherness and belonging is a mindset. On a personal level, the irony for me is that I moved to New York about 5 years ago this month, and that was to take over our flagship creative agency. And I had a 2-year-old at the time, and I was adamant about avoiding a commute at all costs. Like if I was going to be there for a random bedtime, I needed it to be within close walking distance. And so I chose a place a block from the office. And I have had the pleasure of overpaying for this Tribeca loft to look at an empty office building now for the last year. And so I suppose the lesson in this is that you should not base your personal real estate decisions on proximity to your office. You should really make sure that it's a place that actually helps you perform your work at home or wherever you are in that environment. So a complete reframe and a lesson learned the hard way, I would say.
That's interesting. So Matt, you've been a pioneer in building a successful agency virtually from the jump, long before COVID was even on our radar. So I'd be interested to hear your perspectives, what you may have learned over the last year with your firm.
Well, I'll pivot from Laura a little bit because I actually had the exact opposite scenario where I lived someplace where I had moved for Crispin in Boulder, and my wife and I didn't want to leave Colorado, but I wanted to leave Crispin. And I was so frustrated that I had to move someplace to get the caliber of job that I wanted when I wanted my life to be in Colorado. I grew up in New York, but I didn't want to move back there. I didn't want to move to LA. I didn't want to move to Chicago or SF or the like. And I was so frustrated in 2014 that there was this mandatory that I had to move to have the career I wanted. And so I said, well, that's kind of silly. And I bet there's a bunch of other people like me who don't want to live in the big cities, but still want big city caliber work. And so, yeah, we were fortunate enough to be able to build and grow a 100% distributed agency from the beginning. My lessons from the pandemic are actually very different in that, we had no problem acclimating to distributed because we literally have never had an office in our whole history. That being said, the biggest one, I believe in a rising tide raising all ships when it comes to distributed working. And I'm actually very happy that a lot of folks, nobody on this call, but a lot of folks that were skeptical of our model early on, including folks from Crispin, have seen the potential of efficiency and even culture inside distributed work. Our learning was actually different though, because a big part of our model was the recognition that remote work does not mean work from home. And the whole point of our remote work model was to break the echo chambers of the same old big city agencies who draw inspiration from the same 4 neighborhoods within commuting distance of that office, and how do we bridge urban, rural, and manufacturing center to design center and the like. But a big part of that was not trading one echo chamber office for another echo chamber home office. We took all that money that people typically invest in offices and invested it in experiences for our people to get out into the world, when anything can be your office, an art gallery, an airport, a table in the Caribbean and the whatever. How do you get out? Our whole mantra pre-pandemic was, how do you get out and have experiences that deliver the inspiration you need to stay relevant tomorrow, not just delivering work today? And the shutting down of that and the forcing of everybody out of their co-working spaces and out of kind of being exposed to so many different things out in the world, and the travel that we used to, help fund and the like. That was actually our biggest learning of how important that dimension is to kind of, bring in fresh inspiration and kind of reinforce that belief that remote work does not necessarily mean work from home. And, we continue to try and figure out how to open that up in a way that, breaks the echo chamber and delivers inspiration.
Hey, thanks for that. So I'm going to turn back to you, Matt, on this next question to launch. So the question then becomes, can agencies create a strong and sustaining culture, produce powerful creative work, and trusting client relationships long-term with either less space, or in your case, with no office space? Kind of interested in getting perspective. So again, I'll have Matt, you lead us off here.
Yeah, kind of 2 chapters on the answer, at least from our journey. And granted, we're not as big as some of the other firms being represented here, but I've found most clients don't care. And even pre-pandemic, most clients don't care. I've just found, at least for a lot of the clients, including some very large clients, and and frankly, the consultancies have been proving this for decades, that how many times is that client at McKinsey's headquarters versus the consultants going to them? The consultants don't really care what McKinsey's headquarters look like. They care about the personal relationships that are developed, often on the ground and often virtually, with them. And for me, in my journey, and this isn't a knock on any particular agency that I've worked at or beyond, I'll be honest, I've found offices are actually creatively atrophying personally, because I've found a whole lot of people who wake up at 35 or 40 who have just been listening to Fast Company and researchers tell them what's going on in the world. And they don't know, because there's this badge of nobility that 12-hour work days at offices are, the height of what you should aspire to. And meanwhile, there's a cost for all of that, of you're not out in the world experiencing things. And by the time you reach 35 or 40, there's some 25-year-old who's a whole lot more in touch than you are, because you've been stuck in that office the entire, decade. And so I very much believe you can get even more creativity by getting people out into the world, especially if you can attract far better talent because you're not locking them into commuting distance of an office somewhere, but also B, if you can pair that with a strong Pied Piper tune. Now, I am a firm believer for a distributed or even a hybrid model. It puts extra emphasis on what is that Pied Piper tune, what is that aspiration, what is that common cause, what is that soul or DNA that ties everybody together, regardless of what time zone you're in or where you're at. And frankly, at Crispin, I saw the power of a really strong Pied Piper tune, and you need that as to why the hell am I moving down to Miami, or why am I not moving to New York? But if you have that and you can pair it with the caliber of talent you can get when you give them their lives back, no doubt, I'm a firm believer you can create exceptional work and also a strong culture. I will qualify by one thing before handing off to somebody else. I do believe there are certain kinds of work that are better done in person. Retail design is kind of difficult to do remotely. The minute you start doing a lot of work that requires significant hardware, be it VR and AR work and the like, all of a sudden you got to buy 10 headsets instead of 2 headsets because nobody's in the same place. And physical product design is very difficult to do remotely. But that being said, there's a whole lot of things that can be done remotely, and I'm glad that a lot of folks are kind of seeing that these days.
Hey, Laura, as a Pied Piper of a large holding company agency in arguably the global capital of advertising, how would you respond to the same question?
It's no surprise you have Matt and I juxtaposed with the contrarian kind of viewpoint here, because I would say I do believe that clients care. I do believe that they care deeply. And for years, the culture inside of agencies has been evolving to be healthier and less toxic, to offer more flexibility in the environment, putting things like wellness and mental health at the top of the agenda, and really enabling people, I think, to show up as their whole selves and not to celebrate that grind and not to overcorrect by doing away with the physical structure, but really reframe and rethink the conditions. Our global CEO, Chris Hurst, has been saying this for years, that it's particularly true, I think, in our industry, that agencies are just buildings full of people, or now, in our homes. And what makes one building full of people more successful than another comes down to attracting great talent and building a culture and a set of conditions for creativity that allows them to outperform. And you create that culture through the behavior of management. And whether you're in the building or remote or some hybrid in between, the idea is that you're role modeling that. And so as we think about, the office of the future and our return strategy, we're not downsizing our footprint in any way. It's about effectively using that space. And Havas, for those of you who have followed since Yannick Bolloré, our chairman, took the reins about 8 or 9 years ago, we've been slightly ahead on the holding company front, only in so much as that we deliberately at that time moved to a co-location strategy. We call it our villages, and we've got about 62 of these hubs now around the world, where it is all of the capabilities unified under one way of working, with one shared culture and one P&L. And so when the pandemic hits, or there's a crises to respond to, it's much easier, I think, when you can bring people together intentionally in proximity, leverage that footprint, but maybe evolve the way in which you're working within it to support a new experience. It's not about rushing back to an old world order. There's certainly a new set of norms, but the physical ability to gather intentionally is a core part of our competitive differentiation, especially when you're talking about owning the brain trust for a client across an end-to-end journey. It's really meaningful. So we're in the opposite camp on that one, Matt.
And that's why you're both here today. So I'm going to turn to our partner at Gensler, Tom Kurzmanek, to comment, because here's a firm that's designed with some of the most beautiful and productive spaces around the world in many industries, but certainly within ours. I'd be interested how you'd answer that same question, Tom.
Well, yeah, your question, can culture be sustained without space? I better answer no. You need that space, right? But let me tell you why. The culture is really built among shared experience, and the space is where, in this case, the workplace, where that shared experience comes to life in a physical platform. We can all eat at home, but we're all pushing to open restaurants. Why? Because that experience that's happening there is much richer, and it makes the individual connection that we're having with somebody at the dinner table also that much better. So there's all kinds of things that we can't see that are affecting our relationship to our space. Our workplace surveys is conducted over the last 8 months, is people do want to come back, but not back to what they left. Their expectations are different. They're not going to be wanting to sit shoulder to shoulder with somebody. They are going to want to be, as someone said, collaborating a little bit more and want more choice. And our metrics show that it's the younger people that tend to want to come back. The people a little bit farther in their careers know what they're doing, and so have a sense of, they're not giving up some of that in-person learning. So I think one of the things you're going to see for that expectation of when people come back, and for those agencies out there that have already kind of pushed a almost informal or residential or hot hospitality mindset, is, if you've got that looser format, you're going to really need to meld in that digital communications tools to make the space work for people. Matt was talking about experiences that could be provided, outside of the office. I think that's in relationship to when your office space is kind of subpar, but they're really looking at your space as a platform for these other experiences to happen in a physical space. I think it is the future.
Thanks for that. So I'm going to just take off on that last point, and let's get into a little bit of a discussion about where we're going and what this might mean. And so what I can tell you is we see from the member interviews we've done, which have been substantial, as well as the ongoing dialogue we have with members and agency community every single day, that they, in most cases, are looking to potentially reduce their space and or rationalize discretionary travel. That's another learning. Mark Reed spoke quite a bit about that, and other leaders in the industry, about the ability to interface with clients more frequently and with more depth, surprisingly, without having to fly around and do one or two on a good day of flying around. So given that, we don't hear a wholesale or even a very broad move to a virtual kind of agency model. We hear a few cases of that. It's certainly bubbling up more than it would have been a year ago. But what we do believe is through that rationalization of travel and potentially space, that there are some potential margin enhancers. And before our clients come in and try to gobble up that margin, which I know those conversations are starting to happen, I'll turn to you, Kim, and ask, do you see this savings opportunity, and what priorities as an agency leader do you have in terms of reinvesting those potential savings to build your business and your culture?
Yeah, it's a great question, and it's a relevant one. I mean, it's no secret that our industry has been under financial pressure for years. And personally, I'm not confident that minor savings in real estate and travel are going to make a significant shift there. Like, I just don't think that they are. And so I think that in the midst of these changes, we've all got to remain true to the behaviors and actions that have successfully driven us forward in the past. Like, for us, that means investing ahead of revenue. We plan to keep doing that. Right now, we're investing in our performance marketing capability. We're augmenting our design group. We're building out UX. Like, we've hired over 100 people during the pandemic. And that was a bit of a risk, but we're going to continue to do so. But I mean, I think the other challenge, and I'm sure Tom has got some strong perspectives on this, is how can our building overhead work harder for all of us as a creative enabler and a revenue generator? So one of the decisions that we made as an agency was to orient our space and our building around production when we go back. We're moving back into Steelhead, which is our production company. And from our point of view, production is creative. There's tremendous value in getting everyone closer to the work. And that's going to be an enabler to do some of the things that matter to all of us and to our clients, moving faster, having more efficiency. These are key to our collective success. So I think one of the trends that we might see around space is how can it be more functional for us? And how can that open up new definitions around rev generation? Because, interestingly, once it became safe, our stage, animation, sound, editing facilities, they've all been open and remained in service during the pandemic, while, we have been using our homes as our virtual offices, right? So there's a clear sort of learning to be found there. So I think it's interesting to think about what else our spaces can give back to us and enable us to move ahead.
That's fascinating. And I will come back to Tom, but I want to get a second perspective. Maybe Aaron, I'll ask you to come in and comment how your agency is looking at that. But I will come back to Tom because I'd like to hear his thoughts. I'm sorry, you're on mute, but thank you for making me feel better, Aaron.
Sorry about that. I was committed not to be that guy on this phone. Here's what I would say. I would agree with Kim. There will be some savings from travel and office reductions, and our clients, and most clients, are really putting pressure on trying to reduce cost and put that savings back to them. What I hope they understand is that when we reinvest that savings into the team, they will ultimately get better work, right? And so part of what we're looking at, particularly with new people coming in, so much of every agency is about the culture and about how you kind of involve these new employees and get them connected to the culture of the agency. And when you're doing that remotely, it's very difficult because so much of the time and the space of kind of building culture is about those one-on-one kind of interactions, those moments where you can walk by someone's office and feel kind of free to kind of go in and talk to them and get some advice. So part of what I think we're going to be looking at is how do we take that money and reinvest it in technology that would allow us to have a, clearer communication with our team members in a way that feels less two-dimensional and more three-dimensional. That might be virtual reality. We don't know yet. We're still kind of going through that thought process. But I do think that as we're looking at kind of where the money is going to go, we'll kind of reinvest it into employee training. We'll invest it in technology that allows us to kind of work remotely when we need to. We'll look at that, those savings in terms of other types of things that we might need to give employees if they're going to be working from home. Not everyone has the same internet speed. Not everyone has, all of the same type of technology that exists at the office that would make their life easier. Should we be looking at office furniture that is more ergonomic at home versus what we are really focused on at the office? So there are a lot of things, a lot of ways that we can look at some of those savings to kind of reinvest them in the staff and allow them to still feel like even if they are working remotely. And I think we're going to go to a more hybrid model, which I know Matt doesn't believe is doable, but I think that's kind of where we're going to go, which is trying to figure out how to give the best of both worlds. How do we get the best of what it's been working at home and marry that at the best of what comes at the office and kind of try to merge the two?
And to be clear, I think it's difficult. I don't think it's impossible. It's definitely doable. I think it's just difficult.
I'm not trying to pick on you, Matt.
Yeah, all good, all good.
So Tom, you want to jump in on this? Because you heard some really interesting things from Kim and Aaron there. One about kind of reimagining how you use the space more productively, more potentially new revenue streams. I think we heard from Kim as an option. And then also this idea of rethinking the space to its best productivity for employees and that kind of thing. Those all figure into a lot of the things you all have shared with us.
Yeah, there's going to be a different way of measuring the efficiency or the efficacy of space, not person per square foot. The yield of what that platform can do should be able to have quite a range throughout the day. I use this metaphor for somebody the other day, like our dining room tables are good for, dinner for 4, their workplace for 1. And then on holidays, if you throw in an extra table and you get 15 or 20 people. And if we start to think about our spaces, each one of the spaces, what is the utility I can get out of this in different scenarios that begins to match with the goals I want of creativity and individual work and group work aligned to the best creative output. I think those are the kinds of conversations we'll be having with, in the workplace design group in the future.
Thanks for that. So Aaron, you kind of introduced us to that next topic, which is, while there will be many flavors of new operating models, almost every agency is talking about a hybrid agency operating model. And so, I would ask you to talk about what do you see as the important outcomes and the watch outs, as we move to these more flexible, variable models, both to our operations, our culture, and to creating client value. Aaron, you want to kick that one off?
Sure. So here's what I miss. And what I hope that we can can create in a hybrid model. I miss those moments of collision, right? Those moments of collision is where, for me, the innovation comes. And we've seen studies that talk about how much more productive we are, right, in this world. But we're also seeing studies that talk about how innovation is decreasing. And I think the reason that that is happening is because those moments of us kind of making those collisions don't happen as often as they used to when we were all in one space. And so I hope that with this hybrid, with this idea of kind of splitting some of our time between whether that's at home or remote, wherever that remote place might be, and the office still finds that balance. I think all of us, I know I can speak for myself, have become a much more empathetic manager and understanding what it must be like for Laura to have a 2-year-old and have to run an office from her house. And, you know, they're just, and I don't have kids. So that never was really something that I had to deal with every single day. Or having kids that, you know, are in school and having to do all that. So for me, I'm really optimistic that this new model, this hybrid model, will give people an opportunity to live more balanced, to provide an opportunity where they can, look, I think everyone is working super hard. I don't think anyone has stopped working. In fact, I would say at the very beginning, I was really concerned because I thought people were spending too much time. They were too anxious and in front of the computer 24/7. And we're trying to figure out ways to break that, you know, that kind of bad behavior, that behavior in a way that makes people understand that we can still get great work done. We can still, which we've all proven that we were, you know, shooting commercials remotely. Whoever thought that we wouldn't have to have a craft service in our kitchen? You know, it's crazy, but we do it and we figured it out. But there is still that missing social element that I think is so critical for us to kind of regain. And I'm particularly nervous for a lot of the younger, newer employees who are so, you know, curating their careers and needing to be around their bosses and wanting to have that interaction, not just to learn, but to also to prove to them that, hey, I'm contributing, I'm adding value. Just because you can't see me, and sometimes you got to, you know, you want your boss to see you and feel you and understand what you're contributing. And so those are one of the reasons that, no, many reasons, while we're looking at trying to figure out the best of both worlds. How do we bring both of these opportunities together to enrich the lives and ultimately the work of the agency?
That's awesome, Erin. So Laura, I want to bring you in because the village model was sort of designed around the idea of these, the moments of collision in some ways, right? Is to be able to find people with different disciplines and expertise kind of all around the village. Do you want to weigh in on your thoughts as well?
Sure. And I guess I should say in many ways, the 2-year-old stage was far easier than now. He's 7 and remote schooling and juggling that and all the sports and everything that comes with it. So I guess I had a bit easier back then and took that for granted. But yeah, you know, when it came to this question of downsizing the real estate, and as I mentioned, we were sort of on this journey, you know, 8 or 9 years ago with the village, we really have to remind ourselves of 2 things. And the first thing is that we're in the talent business, right? And so we are in the talent business. It's about culture. It's about growth. We are not in the real estate business. We are not in the cost cutting business, and we are not in the resisting to change business. You would have a very different outlook on how to utilize your space and just everything you were saying, Tom, about the metric being reframed now and the way that we look at it as a platform and measure the value. And I love what Kim was saying too, just about kind of hiring ahead of revenue and looking at not savings, but really this is an opportunity to inject value creation into the system in a new way. So, you know, we do have a strong CX and tech capability. We are not a software as a service company, right? We are in the business of creativity. Our people are our lifeblood. We need to come together intentionally to collaborate and intentionally to socialize. And we pride ourselves on that kind of integration. It's core to our competitive differentiation, and it's a core part of our business strategy. So as we think about, what are some of the potential watch outs and outcomes as we move to this hybrid model. And just for the record, we open the doors just after Labor Day in the fall for anybody seeking a psychological safe space to come and work from, and for moments of intention to come together around pitching and wanting to put things on a wall safely and all of that. So we've been really experimenting and looking at this as an open brief. Who better, what industry better to take this on as an open brief to design how we work together moving forward. But I think one of the watch outs is that it's human nature. We have had to all change our habits and adopt new ways of working from home or from anywhere. And I think we need to continue to think about the long tail of those habit changes when we are in this hybrid model, because the interpersonal dynamics is something that I underestimated in terms of, you have a really strong, healthy culture, but it's human nature that there's resentment when some have come in for an intended gathering, and you now have to adapt and accommodate those who are remote at the same time. And so how does this space evolve to really accommodate that kind of flexibility and fluidity, so that not everything is booking out a formal conference room and having a linear conversation and half the teams on Zoom and masks in person. And it's just working through those kind of interpersonal dynamics, I think is a big piece. The empathy, the compassion that Erin touched on is a big part of that. And then I think also just, we have a task force really working on some of the guardrails. I will call them principles versus policy. But I think you want to be able to offer flexibility and fluidity to design this new experience of working. But just like any good creative breakthrough, the constraints can be helpful. When it's so open-ended, I think just like a brief, it can be counterproductive to the productivity. Sort of, anybody can sit anywhere. It's complete open seating. Well, what happens when we have a client coming in and it's just all the what ifs and the small things? I think having some specific guardrails to really help people navigate, but you want them to think outside of the box, but sometimes in the box, there needs to be some clarity and cohesion and some buy-in to what that experience can be like, so that it starts to create some of these new norms. So I think that was one area just in terms of watch out. And then I would say the other thing is that it's really taken the pressure off of the need to forecast and predict and plan so far upstream, and that we've really pivoted into much more of a fluid, always on planning and adapting service model. And that's put incredible pressure on us operationally. I mean, the industry has been evolving away from big set it and forget it AORs for some time now. So this is not new news, but definitely, the boundaries kind of disappearing, the informality of being always on, the text nature of our relationship and service model and building trust and all of that. At what cost, right? So those are some of the things I think as we think about the operating model and reframing the healthy dynamics between client and agency relationship moving forward, really starting to role model some of these new behaviors and saying like, hey, you know what? We're not going to have meetings Thursdays from 2 to 6. That's our time to zoom out and get perspective, but it's not for mental health. It's to focus on your work and delivering better outputs and accelerating your outcomes. And there's a real value to be had in that. So I think it's striking that right balance of culturally, what's the benefit, but as a business, what's the value of some of these behaviors, and then proactively communicating these new norms so that it's not, oh, well, the agency doesn't work in the afternoons on Thursday. No, they're working hard. They're just getting into their creative flow and their heads down. And that's a space that we're being very protective of because we can already see the benefit of adopting that kind of behavior. So those are a couple of the things that I would say from an outcomes and watch out standpoint.
Thank you, Laura. So I'm going to bring back in our expert on space in this conversation. And so, Tom, in some of the interviews we've had with your firm, we've heard the expression that the role of space may have never been more important than it might be today, which is really fascinating, while maintaining a flexible and accommodation to our teams in this sort of new world. What advice do you have for agencies that are evaluating their current space, planning to redo their space, or even thinking about a new space? What kinds of things should they be thinking about based on what you know and what we've learned to get collectively over the last year?
Yeah, one, I just want to say, in listening to all of the conversation here from the leaders, it is exciting me that the future is going to be what we dream, which is new and better. And so it's just been good to be a part of this. I think so, that next generation workplace platform that sustains culture, ignites creativity, supports hybrid work, and fosters diversity of thought. Three pieces of advice maybe. We're going to need to think first, the workplace is part of a bigger ecosystem. It's not just a container for people during certain hours. It is going to function with where people are working at home or one of Matt's third spaces to get experience. And that we're going to need to think about how all the tools, digital tools, are well supported in all those spaces. So it's this ecosystem of work that's not just the workplace that we're designing. And then increasing in that ecosystem at work, choice and variety like we've never seen before. People, think about now as the opportunity to maybe break down what might be seen as hierarchical space. Everyone gets to own it in a certain way. And the talent that wants to come into the office is really going to feed off of those new choices and new experiences. Secondly, I'd say, and this goes to a little bit of what Laura was talking about unplugging and plugging in. The workspaces should have the ability to plug in and unplug. And what I mean by plug in is people will come to the office expecting that the digital technology tools are better than they have at home. So the acoustics are going to be better, the visuals are going to be better, and it's going to need to work for people that are in and out of the office, as we all can imagine. And then unplugging, which could mean two different things. One is being at the office and being in a cocoon and by yourself, or completely not working and just doing that walk around and collisions that Aaron was talking about. So that all of that space and the permissions for that to happen in that space will be part of the space. So plug and unplug. And then thirdly, this is something that I've been thinking about a lot, is what is the purpose? What is your purpose, and how can that purpose be communicated in the space? When the space, people say, I work here, when they say I work at an agency, and it's literally, they're referencing a place, and we haven't been in those places for up to a year, probably most of us. And I think some of the things that people are thinking about is in this virtual disconnectedness, they're just pulled away and they just have the work, and they begin to think, well, if I'm going to be doing it like this, I could be doing this anywhere. And that talent might be walking around looking for other opportunities. So, but it's the differentiator of the space and the purpose of what they're doing that can be manifest in that space that I think really can be the differentiator for the future. Matt, I think about I thought that you were going to say something about, hey, we can do this all virtually and it's fine. And I liked what you said about the ability of your distributed nature gave you these experiences. And I think that's what we should be thinking about the workplace can do for us.
Well, I will. Do you mind if I jump in, Brian?
Absolutely.
Is it okay? Cool. Yeah, because I have like 6 different things I want to say, but I'm going to filter it and focus it. I will say one contrarian point of view, and I hate for the cynical New Yorker in me to come out, but I will, personal point of view, if we're hoping people knock into each other at a water cooler being the best way to create collisions, I would say there are ways that I think a lot of digital platforms can fast forward those collisions. You can still walk by idea walls virtually. You can still connect with each other at various moments in time serendipitously. You can actually be far more intentional in how those things happen in terms of knowing if you design the system right, how person A and person B, can bounce into each other and or connect and or let it organically happen in a variety of other ways. But there is a place for virtual physical spaces for that, but I always hear it come back to, well, we need, be it an open floor plan or be it a closed floor plan or be it the kitchens or be it the communal spaces or going into WeWork's headquarters and seeing how they, but just this notion that unless you have that physical space, those collisions will not happen in the same way or with the same potency. I would push back on, because I actually think they happen far more often in the virtual environment when set up properly. The culture creation, no doubt, I will agree with a lot of folks in regards to distributed model. Yeah, there's no kombucha on tap and burritos in the freezer and happy hours and the like. And I mean, nobody's dating each other. And like, I came up in that world at Crispin and beyond. And there's a place for that. I would say there's a whole other dimension of culture creation that is far more about curiosity and far more about getting exposed to new things, and especially folks beyond the 20 to 25 range. And once you get up into the 30s, that aren't looking for the food trucks anymore, and they're looking to find meaning elsewhere in the world and in their lives. And they, I would offer, have been largely ignored and neglected unless they want to pay $3,000 a month to commute 50 minutes each way in a major market. And I think there's a culture, there's an amazing culture that happens when it's not just Jeremy joining, it's Clinton, New York joining. It's not just Sean joining, it's Calgary joining. It's not just Mike joining, it's Moncton joining, and celebrating the places that these people are living and breathing and coming from, and all the inspirations they have, just as much as whoever the individual is, for this rich tapestry of different locations coming on and off, especially if you embrace freelancers and treat them like full-timers, and this influx of folks coming in and out, all bringing their interesting spices to the stew. And there's inherent limitation of that culture, I would argue, when you force all of those people to be in the same 4 neighborhoods to commute, to the same office, even in the same big cities. You can have 6 cities and 6 offices, but you're still limiting people. And I would offer limiting the culture creation that can happen there. And there's a huge unserved market of more seasoned folks that are looking for a different kind of culture that often is found. I embellish a little bit, but I tell my folks in normal times, don't go to happy hour with your coworker. You just spend 8 hours with that person cranking on a bunch of stuff. You sit in a co-working space with 50 different companies and 100 different people and 25 different industries. Go to happy hour with one of them. Go learn something new, get exposed to something new. Don't just cocoon yourself to, hanging out with the same company. Because once again, I've seen the perils of that from kind of my own Crispin journey in extreme form. I will say, one thing that's interesting to me, coming back to the hybrid model, I will be fascinated. There's I could talk for an hour about kind of opportunity areas and or challenges with going hybrid. I will actually be fascinated how many, especially larger agencies and holding companies, try to make hybrid work, especially as they hire new people. And do you hire them remote when they don't have the shared DNA and history of having been in the office previously, and half the people are in the office, and who's responsible for keeping who in the loop between folks in the office with hallway conversations and those who are virtual and the like. But I'll also be fascinated about the model of, is remote its own office with its own P&L and its own kind of structure. So you have New York, you have London, you have Tokyo, and you have the remote. And remote, actually, because it's just a foundationally different way of working sometimes with people that are driven by completely different things than the 24-year-olds in the office looking to have their social lives revolve around the office. Is there actually an opportunity to create a new office, which is the distributed office, that is actually a separate entity from more traditional location-based offices? For me, is kind of a fascinating model to explore for some of the bigger holding companies. But I do think there's more opportunity in distributed than, especially for culture creation, than some suggest. But it speaks to a different kind of group, if that makes sense.
So I'm going to bring Laura in, who might represent some of that other end. But before I do that, I think it's also fair to say, Matt, that you have shared with us that your firm tends to have more experienced employees. And the data that Tom shared with us earlier was particularly it's millennials, I think, and maybe a bit younger, are missing the social dimension of this work. And I don't want to push that aside as if that's not important, right? I mean, there's lots of, we've all been in the business long enough, we've seen that, but I think that dimension can be super important in terms of culture coming up from the bottom, and also in terms of establishing creativity, developing new ideas. But anyway, I'll tee that up to you, Laura, because Matt's given us a number of things, but it's kind of good as we start to kind of close out, talk about what you think this new flexible model is going to benefit. Even though you're not going to shrink your space, you definitely have committed to a more open kind of fluid remote working, at least in part of the time, if I remember your comments correctly.
Yes, rather than thinking about it as temporarily remote, and I think it's interesting, what you just shared, Matt, about, remote sort of taking on its own life form. I really feel like that is what hybrid is. It's about embracing forever flexible. It's not about this temporary situation of remoteness so that we can get back to being forever fixed. It is about embracing flexibility at scale, which is a journey, that we've been on at Havas for some time. And like others, I think we're just forced to accelerate because of our shared context. And Tom made a point about purpose over perks, and the next generation of talent coming in that need to buy into this industry with a broader set of ambitions than just the outputs that we create in terms of our domain. And so, as part of our path moving forward, and we've got a pretty clear North Star that drives our global group around making a meaningful difference, but it's more than a pledge. There's an accountability to it that really does put an equal emphasis on people, profit, and planet. And I think as clients are kind of coming out of this, we're coming out of this haze of COVID and looking at our common stakeholder, being the planet, our common home, if you will, taking responsibility for our whole supply chain, thinking about how we use our space, thinking about our behaviors with a higher set of standards around that. We're in the process. We're a certified B Corporation in London and in Amsterdam, and we're about to become certified in New York. We're just waiting for the validation to come through. But all these commitments around climate change and carbon neutrality by 2025, and what does that mean in terms of your commitment? I mean, this is what is attracting also the talent into our business, because we're finding that we're taking on challenges that are around DE&I on behalf of brands, that are around sustainability on behalf of brands. And it's the new measure for creativity. Is this safe? Is this essential? I think is where we were a year ago. And we quickly moved into how does this build connection? And now most brands that are forward looking, if they want to be lasting, are thinking about what's in it for the collective. What's in it for humanity? How do we treat our people? Where do we pay? What's our waste plan? So that's the kind of conversation and the excitement that we have as we think about this brief, because what we deliver has a higher order to it. And I think that we've all been in such this reflective time period, and there's a lot more collaboration happening across the holding companies. I think we're coming together and looking at ways that we can drive greater impact on behalf of our industry to truly drive change. And that gets really exciting when you think about, being able to bring young people into this business, being able to bring older people into the business that the industry has failed, and doing that simultaneously around a real clear purpose and intention. That's also part of the space design.
I love that. Kim, do you want to weigh in with any, we're running a little short on time, but I'd love to have you and Aaron bring your last comments around, what you see in terms of that changed office environment.
Sure. I mean, maybe to just respectfully disagree with Matt's perspective on the office. I think the office is about more than food trucks and 24-year-olds and kombucha. I think the office is about a place to really be seen. It's about moving beyond that sort of echo chamber of your immediate team. It's about inclusion. I think we have an amazing opportunity in front of us right now to imbue it with even more meaning and deeper meaning for all of the people who are a part of it. So I'm excited about the role of the office. And I think that even for those of us who are going to be even permanently working remotely, I mean, Deutsche LA has instilled a work anywhere policy, and there will be some who are rooted in different geographies. We're still seeing the role of the office as a hub and a community space for all of us to grow as individuals and as a community. So that's what I'm excited about. And I've heard some great ideas even in this conversation to help us do that. And so it's exciting for me.
Aaron, I'd love to give you the last word before we take a couple of questions.
Well, first of all, Matt, you have given me a lot to think about, so thank you on that. I will say that, there are a lot of great benefits from working remotely, particularly for an agency like ours, where the idea of actually being able to work with people in New York on accounts that might be in LA and vice versa, it's kind of liberating, because you really do get an opportunity to get those types of collisions in terms of new ideas, which are in part based on geography and a lot of different things. So I don't want to make you think that I don't believe that a hybrid or working remotely is bad. Actually, I think it really has provided people with an opportunity to focus and get some meaningful work done without distractions. But what I miss is reading the room. What I miss as a leader is being able to see that, someone might not be having a great day today. As someone who cares, and we all do, we don't see that. We don't have those moments anymore. Right now, we are showing ourselves, we're showing the world the best of who we are, right? We've got the lights, we've got the, making sure that the background is right, all of that sort of stuff. That is not natural. That is not how we normally live. And that does impact, I think, to some degree, how we're staying connected to the people that we love. And they're just as much a part of our family as anybody. So I do miss that. I do think that, what Kim said about having an office as a hub, maybe we won't have, 20 offices, but one with some remote locations that provide those opportunities for those human connections that are real time, real life, and not just on the screen.
Thank you for that. I think we're at 2 minutes. Molly, you want to jump in? I'm afraid we're not going to have time for Q&A. I'm sorry. This was a really great discussion with a lot of opinions, and I'll tell you there's a number of questions. We'll share those back and respond back out via text. But I'm super excited about the conversation we started today and over the series. There's a lot more to come. And it's really encouraging that we had, over 120 people most of the hour, which is a really great turnout. And certainly, I think, speaks again to this amazing panel we put together today and how important this topic is to our industry.
Definitely. I want to echo Brian in thanking our panelists for the great conversation and apologize to the attendees that we didn't get a chance to answer the questions. But as Brian said, we will follow up with you if we have your contact information. We have all your questions and we'll try and get you answers to them. I did want to just let everybody know that we have a few more webinars coming up. Our talent talk on Tuesday. Oh gosh, I got a blank on my computer, so I can't actually see the date, but hopefully all of you can, and I apologize for that. And then we also
Tuesday,
have
March 30th, 4 to 5 p.m.
Thank you. Technical challenges abound. And I will also have our how to have better pricing discussions with procurement with Bobby Singh from WPP. And that's going to be on Thursday, I believe, April 1st from 3 to 4 p.m. Eastern time. So with that, again, I want to thank our panelists and our attendees for your participation and your great questions. And we will be following up with you shortly. Wishing everybody have a great afternoon.
Thanks.